All right, if you're ready, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Hey now, and how are you doing? I want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring Up That. I can't wait to talk to my friend Miranda. I met her online, and then we started talking. Our missions align, and I just want to hear. We all have these problems with our own challenges with our children, but also how to keep relationships together. So I can't wait to hear Miranda's take on things and how we move forward to be more stronger. How you doing, Miranda?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
All right, well, it's going to be exciting because I know when I started looking at your profile and I was like, wow, this sounds like something that I think everybody needs. I remember when I had my first child, I got the book Rookie Dad and to kind of the things that you don't know. But the
Mhm.
part about that also, so it tells you how to do, connect with your kids and things like that. But the part that it doesn't really talk about is reconnecting and making sure you take time for the relationship that caused the child to be had. And we want to celebrate that. And that's when I was like, I'd love to hear how Miranda looks at things and teach us a little bit.
Yeah, this is one of my passions. My goal is to make the term pre-parental as common as premarital. Most of us know what premarital is. We tend to engage in premarital therapy before we decide to commit, whether that's through a pastor or a therapist. But there's not a lot of prepping your relationship before having a baby. And John and Julie Gottman, I know they're very famous. They have a lot of work around this too. And so a lot of my training is stems from them. But um, also working with couples after 14 years and seeing some of the things that occur, it's something that I'm very passionate about. And prevention work is key. Intention is key. And so that's my aim in life. That's my passion of working with couples.
Well, how'd you get into it? So let's take a little step back. It's
Yeah.
such interesting work, and I'd love to know how you got into it.
Yeah, that's a great question because it's funny. I went to graduate school and my initial goal is that I want to work with kids and teens. I feel like I can connect with them pretty well. And so I was going through all my courses and I had some extra credits that I needed to fulfill. And so I decided to take a couples therapy course. And if you had told me like, Miranda, you're going to be working with couples and not only you're going to be working with couples, you're going to be energized after working with couples, I'd be like, yeah, right. Um, and so I really developed a passion for doing couples work. So I switched gears. And then after graduate school, I opened up a practice and did some, other work along the side, to kind of coincide with that practice while I was building it. But I did find that after I met with a couple, I just felt really good. I felt energized instead of drained. So I knew that was the direction that I wanted to head. And then I was out at lunch one day and I said, it'd be really great. What if, because my brother had just had a baby at that point, and now she's going to graduate high school. I was like, gosh, that would be so fun or interesting if I really, focused on the relationship and how it changes after you become parent.
Mm.
It's got to be such a huge life transition because I had had a lot of conversations with my sister-in-law about how that transition was for them. And then, I thought I had this marvelous idea. I was like, oh my God, I'm such a genius. I thought of this work and what a niche. And then I realized, oh, the Gottmans have been doing it for a long time. So then I went into that specific training. And then I was able to do workshops called Bringing Baby Home workshops, which are through the Gottman Institute. And then COVID hit and things kind of changed. I wasn't doing things in person anymore and gave up my office. Now I work from home, which is fine with me. I'm a homebody. But I knew that there was something more that I wanted to do, not only with the work of Gottman, but also just what I've noticed working with couples over the years of my 14 years in private practice. So that's kind of the long slash short story of how I got into the field.
So, what are the things that you've noticed that are relevant?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is really a lack of understanding of what the couple's conflict style is. And granted, this
Mm.
really has nothing to do with becoming a parent themselves, but I think we kind of tread along and we're fine and we have conflict and it's okay, but we really don't understand the pattern. And so I help couples. One of the things that I do is helping them identify what is your specific conflict pattern because when you have a baby, your resources are low, you're sleep deprived, you're grumpy, you have all of these triggers that happen from your own childhood. Memories
Mhm.
start coming up, right? You think like, oh, I worked through this, I'm good. And then you're like, oh, shit. Oh, forgot to ask. Is it okay if I swear on
Completely,
here?
completely. I'm
Right?
from Brooklyn. Yeah, we're
Okay,
good. Yeah.
good. Like, oh shit, this is coming up for me. I've not dealt with this. So really diving in and understanding the patterns and the preemptive things that you start to notice of like, ooh, we're starting to go down this path. Um, that's something that really is helpful for when you are in that place of like, okay, we're starting this thing, we're starting this pattern. Here are all the tools that we can do to kind of get us back on track before we say something that we're going to regret or that's going to be hurtful in the long run.
Mm. Yeah, that's the hardest part. When I've worked with couples, that recalibration. We all use different language,
Yeah.
and by using that different language, sometimes it's even just as simple. I was with a client who they were arguing over taking out the garbage, right? The old taking out the garbage, and when we dug down a little further of why do you want the garbage taken out? Obviously, trash is full. That should be the obvious, but it really was you want to have a clean house. And how do you have that more open conversations to find out what those triggers are?
hmm one thing that I always suggest is really talking about expectations of things. So we have expectations in our mind of what we want things to look like, how we want the house to look like, what we want our roles to be. Even if we're looking at the weekend, right? If we work a regular 9 to 5, most of the conflict happens over the weekend because we haven't discussed what those
Mm.
expectations are. So being open about an example of this, I live in Oregon and the weather is starting to be really, really beautiful. And so let's say coming up this weekend, I really want to take advantage and get the hammock out and get a book that I just started and just soak in some of those rays. And my partner is like, oh man, the sun's coming out. We got yard work to do. I need to demoss the lawn and,
Mhm.
pull these weeds. But we haven't discussed that.
Mm.
And I'm trying to relax in the backyard and he's, using the weed eater out here. And I'm like, you're cramping my style. And he's looking at me like, she's so lazy. Um, so that's one thing is really being upfront about your expectations of like, this is what I want out of the weekend. This is what you want. How can we make that work together? And also those trigger moments, like you mentioned, sometimes we may not know why something is so tender. And that is okay. And I think what I'm noticing is that couples, if speaking for myself, if I'm like, gosh, I'm really tender, this is really activating me right now, but I don't know why, I'm just going to keep it to myself until I figure out what it is. You don't have to do that. You can just go to your partner and be like, something's stirring, something got activated, I'm feeling really triggered, and I don't know why yet. And even just having that connection is huge because you're opening up to your partner about your experience of what's going on in the moment. And so you could be more present together, even if you don't have all the answers to things. And so, especially when we're parents, we're sleep deprived, all of these things are happening, we're not going to know what's going on, but we know that we're triggered and activated.
Yeah, so it's those stronger conversations. But how is it that, not everybody is able to have that communication? I know at one point in my life, you probably any of my partners could not have had a conversation with me. I would have felt attacked. How would you,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that's very common, hearing lots of stories over the years. How would you suggest? Let's start that way.
Yeah.
That's a hard time. Well, I guess let's start the other way. How about just an easy where two people are able to communicate, and then we can kind of work up to the more difficult conversations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think let's start the hard way.
Okay,
Why
let's
not?
go.
Like, because I think that's really common.
Yeah.
I think there is a hesitancy to bring things up for fear that our partner is going to become defensive. So even taking a step back and talking about the meta of it, it's scary to bring things up, especially if you have that conflict pattern where if I bring something up to you, you become defensive. What that does for me is like, why did I even bring it up? Why this is pointless. So if we talk about the meta of it, like take one step out of the equation, and I could come to you and say, there's something on my mind. I really want to talk to you about it, but I'm afraid that you might take it as me attacking you.
Mm,
That's it. You don't have to go into it more. Let that sit and marinate for you. And you can then come up with a time that you can talk about it, or you can kind of sit with it and say, like, okay, I'm going to give because granted, if I were to come to you and say that, you might spike a little bit. You might get
sure.
triggered.
Yeah, right. We get
But
defensive. Yeah.
yeah, if you sit with it of like, okay, she's coming to me because she really wants to talk about something. We obviously don't want to hurt our partner intentionally,
Mhm.
unless you're an asshole.
Yeah.
Um, so letting that sit, coming up with a time that you can talk about it where defenses are going to be down is really helpful. Or even just talking about the meta of, yeah, well, when you do bring things up, sometimes I do feel defensive. So we're kind of up here in the clouds a little bit. Then you can slowly get into more of the tender emotions. Anger is a secondary emotion. It's very easy for us to show, especially
Mhm.
men.
Yep.
Um, Women too. Like I'm easy to anger, but it's a secondary emotion. It's hiding what's actually going on.
Right. And
So
that's where that deeper conversation
mhm,
really, but that's I would say, given from my experience, but that's a healthy conversation, a healthy relationship where you're able to do that. Not
mhm,
everybody, if we're honest,
yeah.
is at that place.
Mhm. Yeah. So one thing that I do suggest if things are just not healthy or not able to have sustainable conversation, things escalate really quickly. It's really important to have a plan where you can take a break from each other.
Mm,
So a very common pattern that I see or that's out there is one person will bring something up, the other person withdraws, right? And when that person withdraws, the other person's like, no, 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 we got to figure this out and feels really abandoned.
hmm
And so if you had a very specific plan of things are getting escalated, most of us have Apple Watches or Fitbits or something that we can actually track our heart rate. So if your heart rate is 100 beats or more per minute, that is a giveaway that you are starting to enter fight or flight response. That is a good time for you to take a break and do some self-care. So creating a plan of, all right, when some people will call it like, have a name, add some levity. I have couples that use vegetable words. Someone will be like artichoke, and that's the indicator like we're going to take a break. It's a 20-minute break. It's enough time to soothe yourself. If you need more time, you can always have more time. And what that does is it slowly, our parasympathetic nerve system will start to come in and calm us down, and then you can re-engage. Now, sometimes you might get right back into that place again, and that's okay. I always praise couples for taking the break because what you're doing is you're creating new neural pathways and new patterns. And if you find yourself always getting back into that same defensive, yucky place, that's where other support might be needed to help navigate through that because it can be really hard to do it on your own.
For sure. A lot of this is difficult to do on your own, and it's a
Yeah.
lot of self-awareness,
Yeah.
and be open to hear that, because we all work from our perspectives, and to be able to see somebody else's perspective, at times it becomes very difficult.
Hmm.
How
Yeah.
would you, suggest people who might be a little bit more resistant?
Yeah. Resistant to like better the relationship or resistant to talking about things or
Resistant to talking about it. Let's start that. If you're resistant to better the relationship, that tells you, my guess is from experience, that tells you the relationship has more trouble than where you're at. But if you're resistant to communicating that, how
Mhm.
can you work through that? Because I've been on both sides of that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
would definitely explore what the resistance is. It's giving us something. It's protecting us from
Yeah.
something. Being vulnerable, right? It's scary to be vulnerable. Um, I'm very much diving into the somatics world of
Hmm.
working with couples.
Yep.
And so even just taking note, and sometimes it's really hard for us to even know what's going on in our body. I think our way of life just is so separate. We get to ignore symptoms and feelings and all of that. So really kind of coming back into a place of what do I feel in my body? What's it telling me? It's telling you something. So I know that's a lot deeper work and really hard to do on your own, but is there a fear that that your partner's going to see you in a way that you don't want to be seen? Or is there some other childhood stuff that's kind of being stirred up for you? Um, Shame is a big one that I see too, of, kind of diving into, oh, the yuckiness of being human.
Yeah.
But really exposing that is so connective. If you have a supportive partner who's willing to see it and sit with it with you, it can be very connective. So, yeah, there's a lot of resistance, and I don't know if, being a man, if you see this where there's more hesitancy in the male community, or if it's, I don't
Yeah,
know.
we don't talk. I mean, really, the truth of the matter is we don't talk, and a lot of times, we get loud and defensive, right? We're taught to, we're the man, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and and again, how we grew up. I mean, I knew, where I am today is not where I've always been, in that I learned all the things that I didn't know, and trying to bring that to the attention of people is really hard. And even to, go through relationships and talking, and relationships don't always have to be a romantic partner. It's in all of our relationships. But, when you're in that romantic partner situation, it becomes a little bit different because you want that, and to explain. You don't want somebody to miss from their perspectives. That's where it's always difficult for me when I explain. Some people's, are like, "Oh, I get what you're saying," and then when I explain it, they're like, "Oh, I didn't understand that."
mm,
How do you? What would you suggest in a way that people can share their perspectives in a way that's not over talking, not mansplaining, not doing the things that might irritate somebody else?
yeah. So one of something a pattern that I noticed that we want to get out of, or a mindset, is like, who's right?
Right.
Who's going to be right in this? And I I say this all the time, and my couples are probably sick of me hearing it. Like, no one's right. You're both right. Um, it's all about how we filter things through our mind, our experiences. Even if I watched every single interaction with a couple, I'm still going to like process it through my own life history, right? So understanding that, like, if you can imagine a bridge between you and your partner has their own world, and I have my own world, or the other partner has their world, we're walking over and we're visiting their world. They
Mm.
have different ways of doing things. It's not right or wrong, it's just that's how things are done. So when you're talking about something and an experience that you want to express, trying to envision of like, I'm here visiting, you're hosting me. So I can really learn more about you and learn more about your inner feelings and your inner world. And then when you're ready, you can come over to my inner world and I can share that with you. So
Well, it's like two separate languages. Like when we go to France, we have to learn French, or a blending of the two. Same thing in a
yeah,
relationship, based on our backgrounds and how we see things. You have to learn my language,
yeah.
and I have to share my language. I can't,
Mhm.
only teach you through, trial and error.
Yeah, yeah. There's a metaphor of like two people touching different parts of an elephant, and one person's arguing like it's soft, like they're touching the tusk, and it's like it's hard and smooth, and like it's this, and like no, it's someone's touching the tail, and they're like it's furry, like they're fighting back and forth of what it is, and you step back and you're like, oh, I understand now. I
Yeah.
see now why you were in this, narrative for you, and why you were saying these things. So it's really taking a step back, because everybody has so many stories and narratives that go on in our heads, right? And we don't often express that, but being able to understand that makes sense to me, why it felt this way for you, why it was so triggering, or why you interpret it in this way, whereas I heard it this way. instead
Yeah,
of like being on the page of like who's right.
yeah, and a lot of times with any sort of relationship and with interpersonal relationships, it's sometimes we have to remember, am I proving that I have to be more right than you're wrong, rather than that we're both right? It
Mhm.
just is a different way to see things and try to figure out that, I still don't agree with the way that you operated or things like that. That doesn't mean you have to agree or that somebody has done something that isn't harmful or hurtful for you, but
Yeah.
it's seeing that my intentions. I mean, when everybody talk to me. They're like, "Hey, how'd you do that?" Or I've done things, or I say things to people to try to get their, pattern interrupt, and they're like, "Oh, that was a little hurtful." I'm like, "Well, why was it hurtful?" And then let me tell you why I said those things. And then they're like, "Oh, I get it." And then it becomes a completely different conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And also if it's something that's really, it's a hill you want to die on, there's got to be some sort of core value that's being threatened a little bit. It's like something's poking on that core value. And so if you're able to do some values work, I have a core value sheet that's free that I work with couples of really identifying some of those. That makes sense too, of like, wow, this is really, there's something really like that. It's out of proportion. So clearly there must be something that's being touched here.
Right. Could you explain to us a little bit more what you mean by core values? Uh, and I know core values will be different for everybody. There's not like one set of core values and we all have that. We all have pieces of it. It's like the areas of wellness.
Yeah, I think core values can change too, becoming parents. So those core values that I'm talking about, if you have a list of values and I ask you to circle five of them that are important to you, eight, let's do eight of them that are important to you. And of those eight, what are the three that's just like, these are the most important to me. And those are what we consider kind of the core values. So an example could be, let's say I'm going to go over to a family member's house who really has different political ideas than I do, but we can engage and have, a conversation. That's fine. But let's say I go over to another family member's house who has different political views, but these political views are so drastically harms not only my core values, but maybe like my family or my children's, the values that I want to implement for them. That's touching on my values, and maybe I might want to distance myself from that family member.
Mm.
Or if it's something that I see with couples where they have a disagreement on whether or not to take a vacation. Someone's like, "No, we need to save our money. We need to save it for a new house or for savings or invest it somewhere else." And the other partner's like, "But I want to go on a vacation. I want to like experience the world." There's a core value there of exploration that's really important. Whereas this other person, the core value could be security.
Yeah.
So identifying what those two values are, how they could be in harmony together, um, it helps to like bring about more of that deeper conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really what it always goes back to, the communication. Once you miss on the communications, that's, at the end of the day, that's where I've always been most frustrated and just talk to me, like tell me,
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. You can tell me the worst thing that you need to tell me and I'll figure out why you feel that way through conversation, and then we can work from there. I don't mind, don't give me a gray area. I can't work with gray. I like
Yeah.
black or white, whatever colors you want. Then I could work with that. You don't like me, great. Tell me why you don't like me. Sometimes you can't change it, and then that's okay. Then that goes back to that. Well, that relationship might not work then. But
Yeah.
if there's I care about you so much, but I just can't deal with this anymore. Then what is this? And having those bigger conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So now that we've started identifying some of the core, what do we do when children come into play? Right? That adds a completely different level of dynamics, to say it politely.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like core values can change once you have kids. It's like, oh, perspectives change. So, um, Yeah, I mean, really talking about your connection beforehand, identifying what it is that how you feel connected to your partner and naming it, being very verbal about it, and making sure that stays a priority once you become parents. Uh, Having a solid relationship between the two of you is one of the greatest gifts that you can give your kids because it's going to be a model for them and it also offers them security, et cetera. So really your relationship is one of the biggest investments that you can have. And so we take our car in to get oil changes and tires rotated and all of that stuff. So always maintaining your relationship is really important. One quick, easy way to do that is to have a weekly State of Our Union address where you go over appreciations that you didn't get to express throughout the week. You go over the week ahead of household managerial tasks, of meal planning, who's doing grocery shopping, do you have any doctor's appointments that we need to be aware of? Then you can move into a place of things that need to be repaired that maybe didn't get to be repaired throughout the week. That's a great place. Speaking of the first thing we talked about, you know it is an intentional time to bring up things that could be bothersome to you. So usually your defenses are down. When you have a set time, it helps facilitate those conversations. And then I always like to have couples end on something fun, whether it's more appreciations or plan your next date night if there's an upcoming vacation that you guys are working on. So that's just like a weekly check-in that helps maintain that thread of the relationship once you have kids. And it's a good habit to get into pre-parents. If you're not parent yet and you're planning on, building a family, that's a great habit to start getting into now.
Yeah, the relationships that I admire are the people who did that. I didn't always do that, and that's where you did have that disconnect. You don't realize it, and one person feels that they might very well carry the extra burden on XYZ in those responsibilities, and they don't see the other responsibilities. So, now when I talk to people and work with couples, that's what I do is make sure that they understand the task list, not to overwhelm them, but to just remind them what each one is doing.
Yeah.
And if it's lopsided, why is it lopsided? Uh, and there's reasons for it. So there's not always bad. It doesn't have to be five for you, five for me, but
Mhm.
it might be, and just to make sure that there's no resentment, because that's where we need to also make sure during these conversations. How do you work through those? The resentment. She's home all the time, taking care of the kids, which is a very high important task. I'm not demeaning it, but a lot of people go, "Well, you're just home the whole day." They see what they want to see versus what the reality is. How would you work with that?
Yeah. I think a lot of people equate baby planning with a chore chart, of like, oh, well, here's what we'll do. We'll sit down before the baby comes and we'll write down all these extra chores that we're going to be doing and we'll assign tasks. You do this, I'll do this, you do this, I'll do that. That's great. I'm all about chore charts. I love them. It's fun. However, once that is in place, that is a very fertile ground for resentment. Because the minute I said I was going to do something and I didn't get to it, my partner's like, oh, that was your task, right? So being really open to change of like, all right, we have this chore chart. It's a very loose, thing because stuff is going to change. Maybe you have complications after birth. Maybe you are experiencing postpartum depression. Perhaps something, happened with the baby and they need extra, medical care. So things are going to be changing. So you have to allow yourself room to adjust all the time. Babies' developmental needs change constantly, right? You think you
Right.
have a pattern down, you're like, this is the schedule, it's going great. And then all of a sudden they like hit that 4 month sleep regression and then everything's out the window.
Yeah,
So,
that's why I've always said it's an ish. So,
right.
and we have to remember that
Mhm.
everything's an ish. I mean, even, to best laid plans. I mean, my grandfather used to talk about the famous quote, men make plans, God laughs. And, we just have to learn how to adjust
Yeah.
to those things, that if you're supposed to take out the diaper or change the child on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and nobody else is around on Tuesday and Thursdays, guess what? The kid still needs to be changed we
Yeah.
still need to have that the dynamics
Hmm.
need to shift, and that's just an easy thing to resolve.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important too to note that if there are two parents, you're both raising these kids. And, with me and my partner, we both work, and granted, things did become more genderedized as I was breastfeeding.
Yeah,
However, we never had this thought of like, well, that's your role or that's your job.
right.
It's just, this is our job. This is what we
Right.
are doing together. And so that mindset, although simple, can really, it just changes a lot of the energy with raising kids as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
and
think the language around that also, a lot of times men will say, "Well, I'm babysitting the kids." I'm like, no, no, you're
I hate
watching
that.
you're watching your kids. You're parenting your kids.
Yes.
There's a lot more than you're not just babysitting. Babysitting, you get paid $5 an hour or whatever the going rate is now. It's much
Yeah.
higher than that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's like $20 at least. But it's that's babysitting. You might help with a little homework, but when you're parenting, that becomes a completely different even mindset of what you're doing, and that intention is really so important.
Yeah. I interviewed this couple on our podcast, and they had this really beautiful ritual that they would engage in. At the end of the day, they would ask each other, how would you rate me on a scale of 1 to 10?
Mm,
And they would rate each other, and then they would ask, what is something that I can do to bump that number up by 1? Like,
nice.
that is such a beautiful check-in, because then it just has this continuity that's really vital in a relationship. And instead of being like, if I rated my partner at a 3 that day, instead of being like, well, here's how you can get to a 10, you know, but here's how you can get to a 4, that would
Yeah.
be really helpful. So whether it's rating your communication style for the day, rating how you parented together for the day, whatever, you want to do, it's just a really nice ritual that you can engage in, at the end of the night.
Yeah, well, all these are like really brave conversations, and
Yeah.
it's scary to do the brave conversations. You also have to be comfortable in yourself,
Yeah.
where you're not coming into it in an accusatory manner. Miranda, this is what I need from you. Yes, there's times that you have to have that conversation. This is what I need from you, but it can't always be that way. It can be like, hey, let's do this together, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. Yeah. More collaboration. Our society is set up so different now. We don't have that big circle of community of people that we once had. It's very individualized, and there's a lot of bad negative feelings of if we can't do it all. I was working with a couple who recently had a baby, and she went back to work. He works from home as well, and they're trying to juggle working and raising this little infant, and they feel like they're failing. It's like the system is not set up for you in that way. Like you're not failing. It's just the support systems are not set in place.
Well, how would you suggest to a couple like that? I'm not asking for that specific couple because a lot of us, right? So you watch Facebook, you watch society. What do? Everything looks perfect. They
Yeah.
don't. They show you the baby's first steps. They don't show you all the times the baby fell. And the same thing is that's a metaphor for a relationship also, right? They'll show you on the vacations when you and your partner might be on a vacation, but they don't show you the difficult conversation that might have led up to that.
Yeah.
How do we s- be able to speak our truth? I'm one of the things I like talking about, and including the bat moments is not about bringing violence. It's about being authentic today. So that authenticity, how do we make sure that we communicate that to our partner to strengthen them uh, within that?
Yeah. Well, get off Facebook and Instagram if you're comparing yourself. I think social media is great. And I really, really love all of those profiles of people who are just showing up messy, and being human. And I think that's so great. So the more levity we can add to this relationship and parenting thing, the better it's gonna be. Because if we can laugh about all the fucked up shit that we did and like the mess ups that we did with our kids and the things that just like spewed out of our mouths that like, oh my gosh, my mom used to say that to me when I was little and acknowledging it and laughing, it really helps a lot of that conflict tension.
Mm,
So
sure.
it's okay. We're all going to mess up. We really all are going to mess up. And each generation tries to do a little bit better. My husband told me once we had our first kid, he was like, "Well, if we can raise her where she only maybe has a little bit of resentment towards us, then we have done a solid job." Um, yeah, lowering expectations. Things are not perfect, and you don't want to raise your kids in a perfect setting because then they're not going to have the skills for conflict resolution. They're not going to have that resiliency that we want our kids to have. So really understanding that it's detrimental for them to grow up in a place where everything is peaches and rainbows.
Yeah, 100%. You have to bring in some real life and know how to manage those things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, I know we've spoken so long. I don't want to take much more time. How can people get in touch with you? Let's.
Yeah. Well, I'm on Instagram. I Miranda for couples. I just changed my handle. So Miranda for couples. And I have my website, loveafterlullabies.com, which is also the name of our podcast. Right now, I created a program for couples for prevention, expecting couples. It's called Us Before Baby. It's open. I'm only taking 20 couples because this is kind of a flagship course. And so there's 4 modules to it. You're going to walk away with feeling a lot more prepared before you have baby. And you also get to take part in how it's going to be structured for the evergreen course. So it's very minimal investment to help me kind of guide what this long-term course is going to look like. So if any of you are expecting, or if you know somebody who is, that would be a great way to get some work done with your with your partner before baby comes. But yeah, that's how people can reach out.
Okay. And I always ask every guest because you've given us so much information, so many things to think about. But if we had to walk into the magic garden, a place where we would plant one seed that you would hope to grow with the audience, what would be that magic seed?
Oh my gosh, David. Uh,
What's the one takeaway? So, like,
yeah,
what's the one thing that you'd love? I mean, that's really what that seed is. It's,
yeah.
and it's not, there's no perfect, like we were talking before. It's
Mhm.
not, there's any perfection. That is a myth. Perfection is in 1 second in time, and then the second after it becomes imperfect.
Mhm. And this would be a seed for listeners to take away with their relationship.
Yeah, or any other seed you'd like to plant. This is
Okay.
this is your garden. I'd love to hear what. So whatever you would like to plant.
I something that's just like kind of stirring in me. I just feel so passionate about relationships. And if we can tend to our relationships like we do other important things in our life, I think this world is just going to be so much better.
100%.
So really, seeing your relationship as a garden and what does it need? Does it need water? Does it need some weeds pulled? Really being so tender with each other because it's just we all have each other in the end. That's all we have. So we need to really just yeah, be mindful of that. And I don't know, that's
That,
what is
that's
coming up for
beautiful. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's exactly, what it is. That's a beautiful seed, and we all have to take care of it, as you had just mentioned.
me.
So,
Yeah, and I think especially now where things are at in our country and just like really tending to those relationships that fulfill us
mm,
is so vital.
okay. Well, thank you again so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. It was great. I hope you and I can build our relationship together, to support each other and
Exactly.
connect. And for everybody else, like I always say, I hope you bring peace and love into your life. And when you bring a bat, remember it's about boundaries and hitting your sweet spot. So hope you're all well.
Thank you so much.